The idea of two nations was mooted as early as 1888 by Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. But in his speech, nation was conceived as qaum or community and not a separate nation state.
On 20th February 1947, the British Prime Minister Clement Attlee announced that the British were going to quit India by the 30th of June 1948 at the latest. The Hindu Mahasabha immediately demanded the partition of Punjab and Bengal along religious lines. But Hindu Mahasabha was a relatively small organization in the larger scheme of things in India in 1947. The Indian National Congress followed up the Hindu Mahasabha demand on the 8th of March 1947 by demanding that Punjab should be partitioned. And this demand was articulated by someone no less than Jawaharlal Nehru, who was then president of the Indian National Congress.
The idea of partition was vociferously articulated by the Hindus.
Well, you see, in 1947, there was a certain kind of demand raised by Hindu middle classes, mostly in West Bengal and the city of Calcutta, for the partition of Bengal. That, I think, was a very short-term knee-jerk reaction to what had happened in Calcutta in August 1946 and in Noakhali and Tipperah in October 1946.
Then what caused the change of heart among the Bengali middle-class Hindus who, in 1905, had come out on the streets protesting against Lord Curzon's decision of the partition of Bengal? There was a dramatic collapse of the Congress Khilafat alliance in 1922 to 23. The communal bodies were revived and there were widespread Hindu-Muslim riots. The communal award, originally initiated in 1909, triggered off an unfortunate power politics in Bengal in 1932. Of the 250 seats in the proposed Legislative Assembly of Bengal, the European group, less than 1% of Bengal's population, were allotted 25 seats. Hindus, including the backward classes, were given 80 seats and the Muslims were given 119 seats. Election to the assembly would be by separate representation. Muslims alone would elect Muslims, Hindus would elect Hindus, and Europeans would elect Europeans. Europeans were less than 1% of the total population. Hindus were 44% and Muslims were 47.8%. The governor of Bengal, Zetland, had a premonition of the disturbances that would be unleashed. He warned the viceroy in Delhi.
It will enormously increase communal bitterness. It will create a sense of injustice, which will not easily be forgiven or forgotten.
However, the Bengali intelligentsia, or the Bhadralok nationalists, adopted a curious position to the award. In all the sound and fury of newspaper editorials, petitions, memorials, and speeches denouncing the award, little was heard of separate electorates and the old imperial game of divide and rule. Nor was there much clamor about the weightage given to Europeans in the assembly. Instead, their anger was directed against the Bengali Muslims, whom they regarded as the award's greatest beneficiaries. At a meeting at the Calcutta Town Hall, presided over by Rabindranath Tagore, one of the speakers recommended,
"Let the Hindus and Muslims be organized as separate nationalities in the matter of their separate cultural interests, their education, personal laws and the like, and then they can, without any discord, come together on terms of equality, equity, and brotherhood in an all-Bengal Federal Assembly.
These words, carrying the scent of Hindu communalism, had an unmistakable resonance with the two-nation theory of Sir Syed Ahmad. The last decades of India's independence struggle witnessed an irreversible rift between the Hindus and Muslims. The drama of partition was now to be played out between the three major players: the Congress, the Muslim League, and the British Crown. In March 1937, when Jawaharlal Nehru remarked that the Congress and the Raj were the only two parties in India, Muhammad Ali Jinnah replied to the rebuff by claiming the Muslim League as the third, a rightful equal partner of the Congress. Jinnah said,
I have got as much right to share in the government of this country as any Hindu, and I must have an equal, real, and effective share in the power.
However, in the general elections of 1937, which followed a voting system based on separate electorates, the Muslim League won only 4.8% of the total Muslim vote. It was unable to form a government in any of the Muslim majority provinces. In Punjab, it lost to the Unionist Party. In Bengal, the Krishak Praja Party formed the government. The Congress formed government in 7 provinces. Jinnah offered to form a coalition government with the Congress in UP. Nehru turned him down. The Congress launched a Muslim mass contact program to impress on poor Muslim villagers that in the eyes of the Congress, their interests were identical to those of the Hindu poorer classes, and to convey the message that the real champions were the Congress leaders and not the landlords and lawyers of the Muslim League. The Muslim mass contact program aroused Jinnah's ire. There was vigorous opposition from the Muslim League. The program eventually failed due to limited and half-hearted mobilization of the Congress task force.
And upon the 3rd September, Prime Minister Chamberlain made his historic and depressing announcement.
I am speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
It was war in Europe, and Britain joined the war. That changed the fate of the Muslim League in strange ways. On September 3rd, 1939, Lord Linlithgow, the Viceroy of India, announced India's entry into the war without consulting any of the political parties. His objective was to turn India into a war base and to provide men and money for the war. The Congress was opposed to the idea. So, Linlithgow turned to Muhammad Ali Jinnah.
Of course, be conceded that the Muslim League produced the Lahore Resolution in response to a request from the British Viceroy, Lord Linlithgow. At that stage, the Congress was demanding independence here and now, and Linlithgow wanted an alternative demand because he wanted to put any constitutional progress in India into cold storage for the duration of the Second World War.
The Muslim League soon became a significant player in the political arena.
the Lahore resolution of the Muslim League that was passed in March 1940 made no mention of either Pakistan or partition. It was in many ways a self-contradictory resolution. It demanded two things. First, the Muslim League wanted that the provinces in the northwest and the east, where Muslims were in a majority, ought to be grouped to constitute independent states, the constituent units of which shall be autonomous and sovereign. Now, this referred to provinces such as Punjab, the Northwest Frontier Province, Sindh in the northwest, and of course Bengal in the east. The second element in the Lahore resolution that was significant was the claim that the Muslims of India ought to be regarded as a nation, not just a minority. Now, this was of some real importance. Muslims lived not just in provinces where they were in a majority, but there were many Muslims in provinces where they were in a minority. And all of these Muslims of India were being claimed to have the status of a nation. Until then, Muslims were regarded as a minority, and there were safeguards that were often demanded for the Muslims as a minority. But now the Muslims thought, or at least the Muslim League demanded, that the Muslims of India ought to be accorded national status. Now, even though the Muslim League had asked in March 1940 that the provinces in the northwest and the east ought to be grouped to constitute independent states, there was another paragraph in the resolution, the fourth paragraph, which made a reference to the Constitution of India in the singular, which would ensure that the rights of minorities, both in the Muslim majority and the minority provinces, would be protected. But what happened after 1940 was that leaders and members of the Muslim League insisted that the national status of Muslims could not be compromised.
At the Lahore resolution, Jinnah said in his speech,
The Hindus and Muslims belong to two different religions, philosophies, social customs, and literature. They neither intermarry nor interdine, and indeed, they belong to two different civilizations which are based mainly on conflicting ideas and conceptions. To yoke together two such nations under a single state, one as a numerical minority and the other as a majority, must lead to growing discontent and final destruction of any fabric that may be so built up for the government of such a state.
Not many days after the Lahore session, Mahatma Gandhi observed,
The Muslims must have the same right of self-determination as the rest of India has. We are at present a joint family. Any member may claim a division.
but he added,
As a man of non-violence, I cannot forcibly resist the proposed partition if the Muslims of India really decide upon it. It means the undoing of centuries of work done by numberless Hindus and Muslims to live together as one nation.
But was the idea of partition really mooted in the Lahore Declaration?
The Lahore resolution did not really call for partition, but he figured out that Muslim Leaguers wanted Muslims to be considered a nation, not just a minority. Because if you simply asked for safeguards for a minority, you could simply, temper the terms on which power was wielded by the majority. But if you claim to be a nation, then you could claim equitable, if not an equal share of power. And Hodgson used some interesting phrases in describing what had changed. He said that as a minority, the Muslims were still like a Cinderella, with trade union rights and a radio in the kitchen, but still below stairs. The analogy here was with Labour in Britain.
Jinnah was as much a nationalist as Nehru, but his abiding objective was to secure the interest of all Indian Muslims, which could only have been possible within a framework of Indian unity.
Jinnah himself, in an interview that he gave to the Times, talked in terms of India being constituted of two nations, Hindu and Muslim, who would share in the governance of a common motherland. He had a friend and neighbor called Chundrigar in Bombay, who for a brief while became Prime Minister of Pakistan in the 1950s. He made it quite clear that the objective of the Lahore Resolution was not to create Ulsters, meaning Northern Ireland, which had been created as a result of a partition of Northern Ireland. But he said that there were these two nations, Hindu and Muslims, who would be welded into a united India.
However, Jinnah had gone on record saying,
The present artificial unity of India dates back only to the British conquest and is maintained by the British bayonet. But the termination of the British regime, which is implicit in the declaration of His Majesty's government, will be the herald of the entire breakup, with worse disaster than has ever taken place during the last 1,000 years under the Muslims.
Jinnah faced a political challenge that seemed almost impossible to achieve. A Muslim nation with its right to be independent, but not actually willing to break away from India. The Lahore Resolution seems interested in the right of the Muslim majority areas to be independent and leaves every other vital concern shrouded in ambiguity.
There is a very revealing letter which Ayesha Jalal in her book The Sole Spokesman emphasized. This was a letter from Jinnah to Nawab Ismail in 1941, in which Jinnah himself says that Mr. Hodgson finally understands what our demand really is. So this was in many ways a play for an equitable share of power, and the Muslim League or Jinnah were not asking for partition, certainly not partition of the provinces. The word partition did not figure. Even the name Pakistan did not figure.
Jinnah is reported to have said,
Some confusion prevails in the minds of some individuals in regard to the application of the word Pakistan. The British and the Indian newspapers generally have adopted the word Pakistan to describe the Muslim demand as described in the Lahore Resolution. I really see no objection to it.
When Stafford Cripps came in 1942, there were discussions that were held both with leaders of the Congress and leaders of the Muslim League. And the Congress, of course, was still demanding independence here and now, or at the very least they wanted the defense portfolio if there was going to be any understanding with the British. But of course Churchill and Linlithgow wanted the Cripps mission to fail, and Cripps could not deliver anything of substance to the Congress or to the nationalists. Cripps was holding out the promise of Dominion status after the end of the war, and as many of you know, Gandhi derided the Cripps offer as a post-dated check on a bank that was obviously failing. But on the question of sharing of power between Hindus and Muslims, or between the center and the provinces, Cripps had produced a formula which was known as the local option clause, that in the future provinces may have the right to opt out of an Indian Union. And this was somewhat appealing to the leaders of the Muslim majority provinces such as Punjab and Bengal.
In 1944, Jinnah stated that
Britain should now frame a new constitution, dividing India into two sovereign nations, Pakistan and Hindustan, with a transitional period for settlement and adjustment.
this statement clearly contemplated a continued subordination to Britain.
Then in 1944, there was another occasion on which Jinnah and the Muslim League were put on the spot. They had to come out with some kind of clarification as to what their demand really was. This was at a time when Raja Gopalachari, the Congress leader from Madras, suggested to the Congress leadership, including Gandhi, that maybe the Muslim League could be offered partition of Punjab and Bengal. Now, the Congress High Command did not have a great deal of influence in the formal electoral politics of Punjab and Bengal. The Unionist Party was still in power in Punjab. In Bengal, there was first a Krishak Praja Party and Muslim League coalition after 1937, then briefly a progressive coalition ministry headed by Fazlul Haq from 1941 to 43, and then of course finally there had been a Muslim League government. So from the Congress point of view, in Bengal there was a Muslim League government, and so far as nationalists were concerned, there was the radical strand of nationalism, which was often at odds with the central Congress leadership. So Rajagopalachari suggested that if there was going to be any kind of Pakistan, it had to be based on the partition of Punjab and Bengal. Only the Muslim majority districts of Punjab and Bengal could go to a Pakistan. And at this point, Jinnah made a very interesting response to the Rajagopalachari formula. He said that what was being offered by Rajagopalachari was a maimed and mutilated Pakistan. This was a shadow and a husk, according to him, and this was not really the demand that he had raised from 1940 onwards. So he categorically rejected a Pakistan based on a partition of Punjab and Bengal. And in 1944, there were some talks that were held between Gandhi and Jinnah. No agreement could be found, but at that stage, Jinnah had again underlined the importance of considering the Muslims to be a nation rather than a minority, because if the Muslims were just a minority, then as he put it, Brother Gandhi has 3 votes and I have only 1. But if you consider the Muslims to be a nation, then there could be a more equitable sharing of power. Now, so during the period of the Second World War, there had been 2 occasions in 1942 and 1944 when Jinnah and the Muslim League might have been under some pressure to clarify what they had really wanted. Before the war ended, there was another attempt at the Simla conference in the summer of 1945, but that did not make much headway because Jinnah was objecting to the Congress sending Muslim representatives as part of their delegation. There was a cartoon that came out at that point in a Bengali newspaper which showed Jinnah pulling away his hand, refusing to shake hands with Maulana Azad, and the caption of the cartoons said, "I don't shake hands with a caste Hindu." So he was objecting to Maulana Azad representing the Congress. So nothing very much happened at Simla. And then, of course, the war ended.
the drama of partition intensified and accelerated its pace after the war. In this drama, there was no hero, nor a villain, nor any neutral observer. The players enacted their own scripts. Millions of men and women were sucked into the whirlpool of epochal events. The fate of South Asia was changed forever. Partition of India created the largest Muslim state in the contemporary world with a population of about 60 million Muslims. Another 35 million stayed on in India, the largest number of Muslims in a non-Muslim nation. The partition served nobody's purpose.
This daybreak, pockmarked. This morning, night-bitten. It is not a morning we'd longed for, in whose eager quest comrades had set out, hoping that in the wilderness of the sky would appear the ultimate destination of stars. Somewhere, the wave of the slow night will meet the shore, and somewhere will anchor the boat of the